Good evening everyone, and thank you for checking out this video. I trust you're all doing well, staying safe, and maybe even making use of some of the extra trading time during lockdown. It is Friday the 1st of May. It's almost 8 p.m, coming towards the end of the market close. And I wanted to make another monthly market watch as we head into May, particularly because it's a very interesting period generally throughout the year in terms of market movement. And the way quite a lot of markets are sitting at the moment, I want to just talk you through a few things that possibly could be setting the tone for the next few weeks and to concentrate on. I'll start in here with our heat map. To begin with, we'll just zoom in here. I want to just talk you at a high level what I'm referring to here. Straight away, hopefully you can see, if we look between April and May, you'll see a big difference in the color shading straight down the middle there between April and May. We look here, a lot of the currencies, very green numbers. It tends to be a really, really strong month for a lot of the currencies. And if we look at the charts, you'll see likes of Australian dollar, pound, Canadian dollar, Kiwi, etc. Markets like that have done very well against the US dollar. We know the stocks have corrected very, very strongly, and they typically do perform really well through April. Metals as well as another market. I've seen nice little corrections. There was under a little bit of pressure earlier in the year, particularly through March in here, but they've been correcting nicely. But what you'll see is right bang where we are currently sitting tends to be a big change, and I actually think this is what we're in store for. You'll see the currencies tend to get into a big negative period through here. The equity market performs well and starts to move lower as we head into May, and particularly then the metals. It's a really negative period for them. Historically, it's one of the worst months of the year for those metals markets. So it's right across the board, and it's pretty much bang on. I say it's the first of May. There's a lot of these peaks and troughs actually occur around sort of 28th, 29th of April as we head into May, and there's a few markets actually look like we're setting up for those, and I want to isolate those and just point them out to you. I will just say that a lot of what we're looking at in terms of the pattern is being derived from this equity sentiment. Can they see the end of the buying, the end of this correction that we've seen, and actually start to move lower? But if we do see that, and particularly say in the US markets, what we'll be looking at for is a big change in the FX world, and starting to see a lot more weakness in markets like the Australian dollar, British pound, Canadian dollar, euro in there as well. Big change. That's where I want to focus on. But just here, straight away from the heat map, we can see this is a period through the year where we typically see a big change of direction. If we go over and take a look at the actual charts themselves, starting in here with the currencies. See the US dollar, and it is the main benefactor. If you go back onto the heat map there, you'll see one of the few markets that tends to be green in May. Historically tends to be the US dollar, and it's generally, we can see this period through here early May. We'll take a look at the charts now in a second, but it's interesting. You see this big spike down in the two patterns, both the historical average and the weighted average. This big spike down right at the end of April. And I felt at the start of this week we could probably see that around whenever the Fed meeting was on Wednesday. I was looking for a turnaround in the market and a drive higher of the dollar yesterday, being Thursday. But we've actually just seen it start to kick in today here on Friday, which is interesting. But it's bang on for that last drive to the downside from the dollar, and to see that reversal. So if we are going to see that move to the upside and dollar strength, we are primed spot in terms of timing for that. Buying on the other side of that, one of the markets I'm going to be focusing on is the Australian dollar. It has performed well through April, but we're in really perfect timing to see weakness into that market. We're starting to see a bit of a breakdown now, along with the US equities. There's a very, very strong correlation, positive correlation at the moment between the Australian dollar and the S&P 500. And that's something which would be crucial to this drop to the downside. But the structure of the chart, the Aussie dollar is still in a weekly downtrend. I'm looking for a continuation of weakness in the Australian dollar. Pound as well, it has rebounded very, very strongly from the March lows. It's been bang on from, we made the low March 26th, around the time we would expect that. We've seen a nice drive to the upside. It's been consolidating for this last week or so. But again, we're now in a really perfect time to see that market start to retrace and start to move to the downside. So I've got pound high on my list. Canadian dollar is another one that I like. It has certainly fought back against the US dollar in the last couple of weeks, but I am looking for now for shorts to the downside, looking for ways to sell the Canadian dollar. Long US dollar CAD is one of the prime candidates. Euro as well. If you look at we'll take a look at the euro chart in a second, and interestingly, the same as the dollar index taking a move to the downside, it's very common that we see a spike up in the euro towards the end of April as we head into May, and that's exactly what the euro chart has done over the last 2 days. It looks like it's following the pattern very closely. And another one that I like is the New Zealand dollar. It has been slowly correcting over this last couple of weeks in line with that seasonal pattern, but we're now in that window for that move to the downside, which can actually be short quite swift. So I mentioned also with regards to the metals and the equities, by all means come in and take a look at those patterns yourself, but I want to just focus on the currency market in this video. But to say all the energy markets, etc., the energy and the metals and the stocks, come in and check those patterns yourself. But if I just isolate what we're looking at here in the Forex world, say this is the dollar index chart. And I will point out as well, I've had a few people, I've been discussing this week with a few people with regard to seasonality, and we said we don't appear to be following any sort of seasonal pattern. But remember, seasonality doesn't tell us anything about magnitude. It tells us about direction and peaks and troughs. Okay, so the seasonal pattern might be indicating something like this, for example. But that doesn't mean the market has to do that. We might see something like this and then a big acceleration to the downside and then like this, and actually make a series of lower lows. But it's the timing of these peaks and troughs and the direction in between that's the critical point. And if you actually do that on the majority of the currencies, if you look at the timing of the peaks and troughs and the direction in between, it's been very close. The dollar index typically makes a low early February and drives towards the end of February. Moves lower, makes a low towards middle of March, drives higher towards the end of March, and then oscillates and doesn't do an awful lot early April, and then sees a correction lower and quite a hard drive into the end of April. So if you take and actually look at the main points with regards to the pattern, the US dollar is pretty close, and I'd say even taking out the magnitude of that move, which magnitude we're not looking for. So if that being the case, and we've seen the move to the downside here in the US dollar, following the pattern, we should be expecting for a move to the upside and this to drive higher. We're sitting within this little consolidation at the moment, holding at support. The key thing, obviously, whenever next week on the Monday or even on the Sunday night open, as we go through Monday, is that we hold at this level and start to see a move to the upside. I'd like to see some aggressive buyers coming in through here. See a bit of a push yesterday on the downside, but it's been quite weak selling. I'd like to see some aggressive buying coming in and through here and start to break. Hopefully breaking through those highs as we get through maybe Wednesday or Thursday next week. On the flip side of that, obviously the euro will be primed. If we're going to see a move to the upside in the dollar index, a move to the downside on euro would be expected. And again, you see, as I said earlier, we typically see a seasonal spike up right at the end of April. We've done that on the euro. We've come nicely up to a level of resistance, which is a fairly significant area over this last few months in the euro. It's a nice area, so we can hold at this point. Again, as we go into next week, I'll be looking for a move to the downside. But a couple of charts that I prefer actually is looking at pound. Again, I mentioned how pound has rebounded nicely towards the March lows and seen a move to the upside. Looking here, double top, almost an inverted or almost a head and shoulder pattern. Didn't quite do that. We've seen potentially maybe looking out at a double top, but I like the pound down to the downside, back down towards that 1.2 area at least. I'll be looking for shorts in there next week. Markets I also like is the Aussie. Even though the Aussie dollar has actually been the strongest currency over this last few weeks, we're starting to see a breakdown. This is as a corrective trend that we've got within the daily chart on the Aussie dollar. I'm looking for a break to the downside and looking for ways to be short on this. I'm not short Aussie yet, but it is on the list to be short. A market I am short is Kiwi. Very similar in there, but it has been underperforming what we see in the Australian dollar. Looking for an acceleration to the downside. Again, just looks at another little corrective move, and it's very much in line with what you'd expect to see in the seasonal pattern. A slow grind higher in April, but an acceleration to the downside here in May. And I say we're just bouncing off a real nice level of resistance. Actually, look at the chart. I'm sure you have very similar levels coming off that level for Kiwi. So it's looking for it to break through these lows as we head into next week and accelerate to the downside. Not sure if we'll actually make new lows at this point in time. I'm not planning to make new lows, but certainly we get into sort of the 158 area would be a nice point, nice trade for Kiwi. And the last currency that I really like is the Canadian dollar. This has been in a broad correction. We see the very strong impulsive move to the upside is the corrective move. It looked like a possibility of an inverted head and shoulders earlier in the week, looking for moves and for buyers to come in a little bit earlier, but we just seen that last drive to the downside on Wednesday. The correction, the turnaround came yesterday. We've seen that drive to the upside, so we've been looking for that low to be made in here. Say it is a broadly in line with it is a correction. We're looking for a move to the upside again. Not expecting new highs, but at the moment I am long dollar CAD. I've got the targets initially set at 144. If we can get to there, I'll take profit. If we start to push higher and price action remains bullish, I will stay with that. But targets at the moment at 144. And there's a big shift right down here between April and May. But I'll be focusing on those currency changes. I will obviously be looking for some of the metals as well to change direction, looking to move to the downside, particularly like copper and silver. I say a lot of this will be dependent on the sentiment of the equities. Can they see them move to the downside and follow through on what we're seeing? So I hope this is useful, guys. If you want to join in, if you want to come into watching any of the live streams, I'll be online on Monday night. We'll be talking through a lot more detail of what I've just been talking about, looking at entries and what we could actually be hoping for, and a lot more of the other markets. So by all means, join in on Monday's live stream. It'll be PM UK time if you can join. If not, there will be recording. It'll be up, but you can drop on there as well. There'll also be a copy of my own notes to download if you can't make it, which highlights the markets that I have on top of my list, the levels that I want to be looking to enter in on, or looking to buy or sell. So, which is obviously a useful thing to plan the week ahead. So, hope that's useful, guys. Stay safe, healthy, and profitable through May, and happy trading.